Hi, this story is my mother-in-law slapped me on her birthday 2 weeks later. A judge took everything from her. What is this? It was not a question. It was a statement flat and hard, like a stone dropped in a well. Phyllis held the mahogany box I had spent 4 months restoring. The tiny brass cylinder inside was still turning, plinking out the notes of Moon River. Her wedding song, the song she had cried over at Gerald's funeral only 2 years ago. Now looking at it in her manicured hands, she looked like she was holding a dead rat. It is a music box, Phyllis, I said. My voice sounded thin in the crowded living room. I found the original 1962 cylinder, the same year you and Gerald were married. I know what it is, Janet. She cut me off. The music box kept playing. Two drifters off to see the world. I asked why you would bring this piece of trash into my house. The room went silent. Forks stopped scraping against china plates. Even the ice in the crystal glasses seemed to stop melting. 30 guests, mostly her church friends and business partners, froze in their seats. I could smell her perfume from where I sat. Estee Lauder beautiful, sweet cloying and thick enough to choke on. I thought you would like it, I whispered. Phyllis stood up. She was wearing emerald green, a street John suit that cost more than my first car. She took 2 steps toward me, her heels clicking on the hardwood. 9 years, she said loud enough for the back row to hear. 9 years I have tolerated you, and this is the best you can do, she raised her hand. I saw it coming, but I did not move. I could not. It felt like a dream, where your feet are stuck in concrete and your lungs will not fill with air. The slap did not sound like it does in the movies. It was not a crisp crack. It was a wet, heavy thud against my cheekbone. My reading glasses flew off my head and skittered across the floor. One lens shattered against the leg of a side table. My cheek burned. Not hot but cold. A freezing numbness that spread down my neck and into my chest. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just looked up. And that is when I saw him, Keith, my husband. He was standing right next to his mother. He was holding his phone up. The red recording light was on. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the screen, making sure he got the angle right. Did you get that? Phyllis asked him, not even looking at me anymore. Keith nodded. Yeah, Mom, I got it. Something inside my chest made a sound then. A quiet click, like a deadbolt sliding into place. I stood up. My legs felt steady, which surprised me. I walked over to where my glasses lay on the floor, picked them up, and put the broken pieces in my pocket. Happy birthday, Phyllis, I said. I turned to the door. Where do you think you are going? Phyllis barked. We haven't not cut the cake. I did not answer. I opened the front door and walked out into the November night. The air was sharp and smelled of dead leaves and coming snow. Behind me, I heard the laughter start up again, nervous at first, then louder, as if I had never been there at all. The drive home took 22 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. I just listened to the tires humming against the asphalt and the blood rushing in my ears. When I got to our empty house in Upper Arlington, I did not turn on the lights. I walked into the kitchen and did the only thing I knew how to do when the world ended. I baked banana bread, my mother's recipe, flour sugar, 3 overripe bananas, a teaspoon of cinnamon. My hands knew the movements even if my brain had shut down. Measure, pour, mix. By the time Keith came home at 11, the house smelled like cinnamon and burnt sugar. He walked in smelling like expensive scotch and his mother's perfume. That scent clung to him like a second skin. He looked at me sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. Mom is really upset, Janet, he said. He took off his jacket and threw it over a chair. You just left. On her 70th birthday. She hit me, Keith. He sighed, the long, heavy sigh of a man burdened by an unreasonable woman. That is just how Mom is. You know, she gets emotional. You provoked her with that cheap gift. I provoked her, I repeated. And then you made a scene, he said, opening the fridge. Honest to God, Janet. Sometimes you are so dramatic. He grabbed a beer, took a long swallow, and went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen. The oven ticked as it cooled down. Dramatic. I touched my cheek. It was tender, swollen. I was not being dramatic. I was being methodical. I could not sleep. Keith was snoring in the master bedroom, a rhythmic, oblivious sound that usually comforted me. Tonight it sounded like an insult. At 3 in the morning, I got up. I went to the small guest room I used as an office and opened my work laptop. I shouldn't have been accessing Mercy Health files on a Sunday morning, but I was the director of procurement. I could access whatever I wanted. The blue light of the screen stung my eyes as I navigated to the vendor folders. Bancroft Medical Supply. I clicked it. The spreadsheet opened rows and columns of numbers that I had memorized over the last 6 years. Contract value $2.1 million annually. Status renewed. Signatory Janet L. Kinsey. Me. I sat back in my chair. The house was silent, but my head was screaming. For 6 years, I had signed off on this contract. I had smoothed over late deliveries. I had waived penalties when their compliance paperwork was sloppy. I had done it because they were family, because Keith asked me to, because Phyllis needed the money to keep her country club membership and her Street John suits. I pulled up the vendor analysis report I had run 2 years ago just for my own curiosity. Mercy Health accounted for 68% of Bancroft Medical's total revenue, 60 at 8%. Without my signature, Bancroft Medical was not a company. It was a hobby with a payroll it could not meet. I looked at the number again. 2.1 million. Phyllis thought I was worthless trash. She thought she could slap me in front of 30 people and I would just take it like I had taken her insults for 9 years. She did not know. She had no idea that the hand she slapped was the only thing holding her empire together. I reached for my phone. I did not text Keith. I did not text my sister. I opened the camera app. I turned it around and took a picture of my face. The bruise was blooming now, a dark purple shadow across my cheekbone. I took 3 photos. Front, side, close up. Then I created a new folder on my laptop. I named it November 9th. I dragged the contract file into it. Then the vendor analysis. Then the photos. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked. Keith was getting up to use the bathroom. I closed the laptop. My cheek throbbed a steady, rhythmic beat. Happy birthday, Phyllis, I thought. The real party was just getting started. Monday morning tasted like concealer. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 6, applying a third layer of heavy beige paste to my left cheekbone. First, the green color corrector, then the foundation, then the powder. It still looked like a thundercloud trapped under my skin, a dark, angry purple that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. I pulled my hair forward, letting it curtain the left side of my face. I chose a blouse with a high collar, something stiff and professional that felt like armor. Driving to Mercy Health usually gave me time to think, but today the 20-minute commute was a blur of brake lights and panic. I kept checking the rearview mirror, terrified that the makeup had melted, that the mark of Phyllis's hand was glowing for the world to see. I walked into the office with my head down. I scanned my badge, got my coffee, and made it to my desk without looking anyone in the eye. I kept my left side turned toward the wall, pretending to be deeply engrossed in a stack of invoices. At 8:30, Dawn Halverson walked by. Dawn and I had worked together for 6 years. She was the senior analyst, a woman who could find a decimal error in a 1,000-page spreadsheet while talking about her son's soccer game. She stopped at my cubicle, holding her mug that said, World's Okayest Analyst. Morning, Jan, she said. I didn't look up. Morning, Dawn. She didn't move. I could feel her standing there. Jan, look at me. I turned slowly. I kept my chin tucked, trying to hide behind my hair, but Dawn took a step closer. Her eyes widened. She set her coffee down on my desk with a sharp clink. Oh my God, she whispered. What happened? The lie came out automatically, a script I hadn't even written. Cabinet door, I said. I left it open. I turned too fast. Clumsy. Dawn stared at me. Her expression didn't change. She had been married for 20 years to a man she finally left 3 years ago. I remembered the days she used to come in wearing scarves in July. Jan, she said softly, that is not a cabinet door. The office hummed around us. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, the low murmur of the sales team down the hall. My mother-in-law, I said. The words felt like vomiting. Violent, ugly, and necessary. Dawn didn't gasp. She didn't ask questions. She just walked over, closed my office door, and pulled up a chair. Tell me everything. By 2 that afternoon, we were in conference room B. The thermostat was set to 68 degrees freezing as always, but I was sweating. Dawn had the whiteboard marker in her hand. The smell of dry erase ink was sharp in the small room. On the board, she had drawn a pie chart that I already knew by heart, but seeing it in red and blue ink made my stomach turn over. "Here is the reality," Dawn said, capping the marker. She pointed to the blue section of the chart. It took up almost the entire circle. Bancroft Medical's total revenue last year was $3.08 million. The Mercy Health contract, which you manage, is $2.1 million. She wrote the number on the board. $2.1 million. She circled it twice. "That is 68.2% of their business," Dawn said. She tapped the board. "Without this contract, they do not have a company. They have a garage sale." I stared at the number. I knew it. I was the one who approved the purchase orders every month, but I had never looked at it like this. "I was just doing my job," I said, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "No," Dawn said. She sat down across from me, her voice hard. "You were protecting your husband's family. There is a difference." She leaned forward. "Jan, she hit you." And Keith recorded it. "For entertainment." The room went silent. The ventilation system rattled overhead. "What do you want to do?" Dawn asked. I looked at the whiteboard. I looked at the blue ink. For 9 years, I had asked myself what Phyllis wanted. I had asked what Keith wanted. I had asked what my own mother would have wanted me to do to keep the peace. I had never not once asked what I wanted. "I want to go home," I said. Dawn nodded. "Go. I will send you the file." When I got home, the house was dark. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the banana bread I had made 2 nights ago, a ghostly sweetness that made me feel nauseous. Keith wasn't there. He was at Phyllis's. I knew it without checking his location. He was probably drinking scotch and agreeing with her that I was unstable. I sat at the kitchen table. The only light came from the stove hood and the glow of my laptop screen. Next to the computer, I placed a manila folder I had pulled from the bottom of the filing cabinet. The tab read Kinsey Bancroft Prenuptial. I hadn't looked at it since the day I signed it 9 years ago. Phyllis had insisted on it. She had hired the most expensive family law attorney in Columbus to draft it, terrified that the procurement director from the wrong side of town was after the Bancroft fortune. I opened it. The paper was crisp, heavy bond. I read through the clauses. Separation of assets. Waiver of spousal support. Anything acquired prior to the marriage remained sole property. Phyllis had meant for it to protect Keith. She thought he was the one with the assets. But Keith had spent every dime he made on cars and trips and keeping up appearances. I had saved, I had invested. I made $142,000 a year, and I had put 40% of it away for 9 years because I never felt safe. My savings account balance was $387,000. Keith's balance, the last time I checked, our joint checking was $1,200. I turned the page. Clause 14. Income earned during the marriage shall remain the separate property of the earning spouse. My lawyer, a strip mall attorney I could barely afford at the time, had added that. Phyllis' lawyer had laughed and agreed, thinking my income would never matter. The prenup didn't protect Keith. It protected me. I reached for my phone. My hands were steady now. I opened Instagram. Keith's story from Saturday night was still up. It had been posted 23 hours ago. In 1 hour, it would disappear. I pressed screen record. I watched the video play on my phone screen. The party. The guests laughing. Phyllis holding up a scarf. And in the background, sitting in the chair by the door, was me. I looked small, anxious, waiting for the blow I didn't know was coming. I saved the recording. Then I texted Keith. "Do you still have the video from Saturday?" 3 dots appeared instantly, then disappeared, then appeared again. "What video?" he replied. "The one you took when your mother hit me," I typed. A long pause. "I was just recording the party," Janet came the reply. "Don't be dramatic. Don't be dramatic." The words floated on the screen. I looked at the kitchen window. I could see my reflection in the dark glass. The high collar. The hair hiding my face. The woman who made banana bread when her heart was breaking. because that was what her mother taught her to do. I closed my eyes and saw my mother's hospital room, the smell of antiseptic and dying flowers, her hand thin as paper gripping mine. "Promise me," she had whispered. "Promise me you will find a real family." I had spent 30 years trying to keep that promise. I thought she meant I should find people to serve, people to please, people who would let me sit at their table if I didn't make too much noise. But sitting in the dark with a prenup on one side and a $2.1 million contract on the other, I realized I had misunderstood her. You don't find a family by begging for scraps. I picked up my phone and dialed Dawn. She answered on the first ring. "I know a lawyer," she said before I could speak. "Ward Collier." "He used to represent Gerald Bancroft." "Gerald?" I asked. "Phyllis' husband." "The irony is thick," Dawn said. "Ward told me once that Gerald was the good one in that family. He said Phyllis was the one he worried about." I looked at the bruise in the window reflection. "Set up the meeting," I said. I hung up. I closed the prenup folder and stacked it on top of the Bancroft file. 2 weapons loaded and ready. I opened the Notes app on my phone. I created a new list. Things I need to stop doing. I typed the first item, protecting people who hurt me. I stared at the sentence until the letters blurred. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the stove light, and went upstairs to sleep in the guest room. Wednesday morning broke with a gray, relentless drizzle that seemed determined to wash the color out of Columbus. I sat in my car for 10 minutes outside the brick building on South High Street, watching the windshield wipers slice back and forth. Slice, return, slice, return. My heart was doing the same thing against my ribs. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. The bruise had shifted from angry purple to a sickly yellow-green, like a map of a country that only existed in nightmares. I had stopped trying to cover it. The concealer just made it look like I had a skin disease, and today, for the first time in 9 years, I needed people to see exactly what I was. I walked into the law offices of Collier and Strauss at 10:55 for an 11 o'clock appointment. The waiting room smelled of lemon furniture polish and old dust, the kind of smell that settles in places where people whisper about their worst mistakes. The receptionist, a woman with reading glasses on a pearl chain, looked at my cheek. Her eyes held that flicker of pity I was starting to recognize. She didn't say anything, just buzzed me through. Ward Collier's office was not the glass and steel intimidator I expected. It was a cavern of dark oak and leather lined with bookshelves that looked like they hadn't been dusted since the Reagan administration. Ward himself stood up from behind a desk that could have served as a landing strip. He was taller than I expected, with silver hair combed back severely and a suit that looked expensive but lived in. "Mrs. Kinsey," he said. His voice was a low rumble like gravel turning in a cement mixer. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He gestured to the leather chair opposite him. I sat. I placed my bag on the floor. I took out the manila folder Dawn had helped me organize. "I want to sue my mother-in-law," I said. Ward didn't blink. He sat down, pulled a yellow legal pad toward him, and uncapped a fountain pen. A Mont Blanc. I recognized the Snowcap logo. "Tell me why," he said. I told him. I didn't cry. I didn't stumble. I spoke like the director of procurement presenting a vendor analysis. I gave him the date, the time, the location, the witnesses, the gift, the slap, the video. I spoke for 14 minutes. Ward wrote for 14 minutes. The only sound in the room was the scratching of his nib against the paper and the soft ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. When I finished, I sat back. My hands were folded in my lap. They were cold. Ward put the cap back on his pen. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "And your husband?" he asked. "He recorded it," I said, "at her request. And since the incident, he told me I was being dramatic. He told me I provoked her. He is currently sleeping in our master bedroom while I sleep in the guest room." Ward looked at me. His eyes were gray, sharp, and completely devoid of the pity I had seen in the lobby. He looked like a man assessing the structural integrity of a bridge. "Mrs. Kinsey," he said, "I have practiced law in this county for 31 years. I have handled divorces that involved SWAT teams and estate disputes that ended in arson. I have never in 3 decades had someone hand me a case this clean. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She has money, I said. She has connections. She plays golf with Judge Henderson. Ward waved a hand, dismissing Phyllis's social calendar as if it were a gnat. Golf doesn't matter when there is video evidence of assault, he said. Here is what we are going to do. He held up 3 fingers. Track 1. Criminal. You leave here and go to the Bexley Police Precinct. You file a report for assault. You get a temporary protection order. He folded 1 finger down. Track 2. Civil. We sue Phyllis Bancroft for assault battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We ask for damages, not because you need the money, but because a civil judgment goes on her record. It humiliates her. And based on what you have told me about Phyllis Bancroft, humiliation is the only currency she understands. He folded the 2nd finger. Track 3. Divorce. We file a petition for dissolution of marriage. We cite the domestic violence. We cite your husband's complicity. We enforce the prenuptial agreement you told me about. He leaned forward. And the contract he asked. The medical supply contract with Mercy Health. I felt a cold thrill shoot down my spine. That is separate, I said. I have to disclose the conflict of interest to my employer. Once I file the police report, I have a legal obligation to report it to Mercy Health Compliance. Ward smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. And once you report it, what happens? I recuse myself, I said. They will audit the account, and what will they find? I hesitated. I thought about the compliance flags I had buried, the late deliveries. They will find enough, I said. Ward nodded. He opened a drawer and pulled out a retainer agreement. Do you know why I took this meeting, Jan? Can I call you Jan? Yes. I represented Gerald Bancroft in '98. Just some estate planning. Good man. Quiet man. He looked at the diploma on his wall, framed in heavy mahogany. He sat in that chair you are sitting in and told me that his wife was the most terrifying person he had ever met. He said he stayed with her because he was afraid of what she would do to the boy if he left. Keith, I whispered. Ward looked back at me. Gerald thought he was protecting his son by staying. He wasn't. He was just teaching his son that abuse is a form of love. He slid the paper across the desk. Let's finish what Gerald couldn't, he said. I signed the paper. The ink looked wet and black like fresh tar. The drive to the Bexley Police Precinct took 15 minutes. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. I parked next to a cruiser and sat for a moment watching a police officer walk a German shepherd across the damp grass. I was about to walk into a police station and report my husband's mother. In the South, where my mother was from, you didn't do this. You kept your business on the porch. You swallowed your pride along with your iced tea, and you pretended everything was fine until the day you died. But my mother was dead, and I was done swallowing. The precinct was quieter than I expected. No ringing phones, no yelling criminals, just fluorescent lights and a smell like floor wax and stale coffee. The officer at the desk was young. Officer Miller, his badge said. He looked like he should still be in high school. I need to file a report, I said. For assault. He handed me a clipboard without looking up. Fill this out. Have a seat. I sat on a plastic chair bolted to the floor. I wrote down my name, my address, the date of the incident, description of incident. I stared at the blank lines. How do you describe 9 years of small cuts in 3 lines? I wrote. The suspect struck the victim across the left side of the face with an open hand. The incident was unprovoked. When Officer Miller called me back, he took me to a small room with a camera on a tripod. I need to document the injury, ma'am, he said. I brushed my hair back. I looked into the lens. Flash. Turn to the right, please. Flash. Chin up. Flash. I felt like a specimen. A buck pinned to a board, but for the first time I didn't feel ashamed. The shame belonged to Phyllis. These photos were just the receipts. Do you want to press charges? Officer Miller asked, lowering the camera. Yes, I said. We will contact the suspect, he said. And Mrs. Kinsey, if you are afraid for your safety, we can request an emergency protective order. My lawyer is filing one this afternoon, I said. I walked out of the station. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Keith. "Where are you? Mom is asking if you are coming to dinner Sunday." I looked at the message. I didn't laugh though. The absurdity of it clawed at my throat. Dinner. She slapped me on Saturday, and she expected me at the table on Sunday. I didn't reply. I drove to Dawn's apartment. Dawn lived in Clintonville in a second-floor walk-up that smelled of cat litter and vanilla candles. She opened the door before I could knock. She took one look at my face, pulled me inside, and sat me at her small cluttered kitchen table. She didn't say a word. She just put a kettle on the stove. I watched her move. Dawn was messy. Her counters were covered in mail, her sink had dishes in it, and there was a basket of unfolded laundry on the chair. It was the opposite of Phyllis's pristine, sterile mausoleum. It felt like air. She put a mug of chamomile tea in front of me. "I filed it," I said. "The report." Dawn nodded. She sat down opposite me, wrapping her hands around her own mug. "Good." I picked up the tea. The steam hit my face warm and gentle. And then without warning, I started to cry. It wasn't a cinematic weep. It was a jagged, ugly thing that started in my stomach and ripped its way up. I put the mug down because my hands were shaking so hard I thought I would drop it. Dawn reached across the table and grabbed my hands. Her grip was tight. "I spent 4 months fighting it," I choked out. The words felt stupid as soon as I said them. 4 months. I went to 3 estate sales. I found the guy in Granville who repairs antique mechanisms. "I know," Dawn said, softy. It played Moon River Dawn, their wedding song. I thought if I gave her something that meant something real, she would see me. I pulled my hands away to wipe my face. The tears were hot on my skin, burning where the bruise was. "She called it trash," I whispered. "She called it worthless trash." Dawn stood up. She walked around the table and stood behind me, her hands on my shoulders. "Jen," she said. Her voice was fierce. "Listen to me." She wasn't talking about the music box. I froze. "She has called you trash for 9 years, Dawn said. She just finally used the word. The box was beautiful. You are thoughtful and kind, and you tried. You tried harder than anyone I know." She squeezed my shoulders. "She didn't slap you because the gift was bad. She slapped you because you are better than her, and she knows it." I sat there, the truth of it settling over me like a heavy blanket. I am better than her, I thought, and I am going to prove it. I drove home at 8:30. The house was dark again except for the blue flicker of the television in the living room. I parked in the driveway. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment listening to the engine tick. This was my house. My name was on the deed. I paid the mortgage from the joint account that was mostly funded by my paycheck. I checked my phone. One new email from Ward Collier. Subject filings confirmed. Body. The petition has been filed. The TPO request is in. Process server will attempt delivery to Mrs. Bancroft tomorrow morning. I took a deep breath. The air in the car was cold. I walked inside. Keith was on the couch. He was wearing his sweatpants and a t-shirt from a golf tournament 3 years ago. A half-empty bottle of beer sat on the coaster on the coffee table. ESPN was on. Some game. Men running, crowds cheering. He looked up when I walked in. He didn't mute the TV. "You are late," he said. I hung my coat in the closet. I took off my boots and lined them up perfectly on the mat. "I was at the police station," I said. It took a second for the words to register. I saw the moment they hit him. His hand paused halfway to his mouth with the beer bottle. He set it down. When I walked into the living room, I stood behind the armchair, keeping a piece of furniture between us. I went to the precinct, Keith. "I filed a police report for assault against your mother." Keith shot up from the couch. The cushion wheezed as his weight left it. "You did what?" His face went red, not a flush, but a deep blotchy crimson. "I filed a report," I repeated. My voice was calm, unnervingly calm. "Janet, are you insane?" He took a step toward me. "She slapped you." It was a slap. People get slapped. You are blowing this completely out of proportion. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The way his hair was thinning at the crown. The way his chin disappeared into his neck when he was angry. She hit me in the face, Keith, in front of 30 people. She was dressed. He threw his hands up. It was her birthday. The catering was late. The guests were loud. She snapped. It happens, I asked. Does it happen to you? Has she ever hit you? He looked away. His eyes darted to the TV, then back to me. That is different. How I am her son, and I am your wife, I said. I am the woman you promised to protect. Keith let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. Oh, spare me the vow speech. You are doing this to embarrass her. That is all this is. You are vindictive. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I hired a lawyer, Keith, Ward Collier. Keith froze. The name meant something to him. It meant something to everyone in Bexley who had money. Ward filed for a protective order this afternoon, I said. There is a hearing on Monday. Keith stared at me. His mouth opened, then closed. You can't do that, he whispered. You can't take Mom to court. I already did. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked like a trapped animal. You have to drop it, he said. Jan, seriously, you have to go down there tomorrow and drop it. If this gets out, my job. Her reputation. Do you have any idea what you are doing? I know exactly what I am doing, I said. He glared at me. The malice in his eyes was familiar. It was his mother's look. Mom was right about you, he spat. You are unstable. You have always been fragile, Janet. Everyone knows it. We have all been walking on eggshells around you for years. Unstable. The word hung in the air between us, toxic and heavy. I had heard it whispered at Thanksgiving dinners. I had heard it murmured in the kitchen while I cleared the table. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a happy smile. If I am so unstable, I said maybe you shouldn't sleep in the same room with me. What I want you in the guest room tonight. Keith laughed again, a bark of disbelief. This is my house, Janet. I looked around the room. The paint color I chose, the curtains I hemmed, the mortgage I paid. It is our house, I said. And there is a protective order hearing on Monday that might change who is allowed to be in it. He stared at me. He looked at my face, at the bruise that was now impossible to miss in the harsh overhead light. He looked at the phone in my hand. For the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. He realized the furniture had moved. The tectonic plates of his life had shifted while he was watching ESPN, and he had no idea where to stand. Fine, he sneered. He grabbed his beer. You want to play the victim? Go ahead. Sleep alone. See if I care. He marched past me toward the stairs. At the bottom step, he turned back. You are going to regret this, Janet. You don't know who you are messing with. I watched him go up. I heard the door to the guest room slam. I stood in the living room. The crowd on the TV cheered for a touchdown. I walked over to the coffee table. I picked up the coaster where his beer had been. There was a ring of condensation on the wood. I wiped it up with my sleeve. You recorded it, Keith. I whispered to the empty room. I went to the kitchen and double-checked the locks on the back door. Then I checked the front door. I turned off the lights, leaving the house in darkness. Upstairs, the floorboards creaked as Keith paced in the guest room. Back and forth. Back and forth. I went to the master bedroom. The bed looked enormous. I sat on the edge of the mattress and pulled the duvet up. I didn't regret it. I lay down in the center of the bed, claiming the space. My cheek throbbed in time with my pulse. Boom, boom, boom. I closed my eyes. The war has started, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just holding the shield. I was holding the sword. Thursday morning, in Ward Collier's conference room, felt less like a legal consultation and more like a war room briefing. Ward stood at the head of a long mahogany table that reflected the gray Columbus sky through the window. He had laid out a timeline on a whiteboard, his handwriting sharp and angular in blue marker. Day 1 was yesterday, he said, tapping the board. Police report filed. Protective order request submitted. He drew a line to the right. Day 6 is Monday. That is the hearing for the protective order. Phyllis will be there. She will bring a lawyer who costs more an hour than you make in a week. I stared at the date. Monday, 4 days away. Day 8 is Wednesday, Ward continued. We file for divorce. He looked at me. And day 10 next Friday is when Mercy Health makes a decision on the contract. I sat very still. My hands were wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Phyllis will fight, I said. It was not a guess. It was a fact like gravity. She will fight dirty. She has money and she has pride, and I am not sure which one she values more. Ward capped the marker. He sat on the edge of the table, crossing his ankles. She does not have facts, January, and in a courtroom, facts are the only currency that matters. He pulled a document from a folder. It was thick stapled at the top. This goes out today, he said. Emergency motion for digital evidence preservation. What does that mean? It means we are serving Keith with a court order requiring him to preserve all data on his phone, his cloud backups, and his social media accounts. If he deletes that video, he's destroying evidence in a criminal investigation and a civil suit. That is a felony. I felt a tightening in my chest. Keith, what if he already deleted it? I asked. He texted me last night. He is scared. Ward smiled. It was a small, dry expression. He posted it on Instagram, didn't he? Yes. Saturday night. Instagram servers keep everything, Ward said. But more importantly, Mrs., Kinsey men who record things for their mothers never delete them. That video is his proof. Proof of what? Proof that he is a good son. The words landed heavy in the quiet room. A good son. Keith has spent 40 years trying to be a good son to a woman who only loved him when he was useful. Ward slid the paper across the table. We let the video do the talking, he said. We don't argue with her. We don't engage with her lawyer's bluster. We just press play. I nodded. I picked up the document. It felt heavy for just a few sheets of paper. I drove to work with emotion sitting on the passenger seat like a passenger. Friday morning, the air in the Mercy Health corporate office felt different, or maybe I was different. For 6 years, I had walked these hallways as the director of procurement, a woman who knew the price of surgical gloves down to the cent. Today, I was walking them as a woman holding a match. I knocked on Greg Noonan's door at 9 sharp. Greg was the VP of operations. He was a good man, the kind who kept photos of his golden retrievers on his desk and actually asked about your weekend. He looked up from his computer, smiling. Jan, he said, come in. Everything okay? I closed the door behind me. I didn't sit down. I need to make a formal disclosure, I said. Greg's smile faded. He took off his reading glasses and set them on the desk. Okay. I took a breath. I had rehearsed this in the shower, in the car, in the elevator. I have a conflict of interest regarding the Bancroft Medical Supply account, I said. Greg frowned. He leaned back in his chair. Bancroft, you have managed that vendor for 6 years. Yes. And the owner, Phyllis Bancroft, is my mother-in-law. Their VP of sales, Keith Bancroft, is my husband. The silence in the office was absolute. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the break room down the hall. Greg stared at me. He looked at the family photo on his desk, then back at me. You are married to the vendor, yes. For how long? 9 years. Greg let out a long, slow breath. He rubbed his face with both hands. Jan, he said, you know the policy. Immediate family relationships with vendors must be disclosed prior to contract signing. I know. Why are you telling me this? Now I stood straighter. The bruise on my cheek was covered with makeup, but I could feel it throbbing under the layers. Because I am filing for divorce, I said. And because there was an incident, I have filed a police report for assault against Mrs. Bancroft. Greg's eyes widened. He looked at my face, searching for the mark I had hidden. Assault, yes. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, then turned back to me. You have been signing off on their invoices for 6 years. 2.1 million a year, yes. Did you ever approve a price increase that was not market justified? No. Did you ever accept gifts? No. Did you ever cut him off? I extended the grace period on 2 compliance issues, I said. Once in 2022 for late deliveries. Once last year for a sterilization packaging issue. I noted it in the file as departmental discretion. Departmental discretion, Greg repeated. He walked back to his desk and sat down. He looked tired. That is your discretion, January. That is within your authority. I know, I said, but I exercised it because she was family. I would not have done it for another vendor with that record. I take full responsibility for that. He looked at me for a long time. I braced myself. This was the part where he asked for my badge. This was the part where security escorted me out. Jan, he said quietly, you are one of the best procurement directors in this system. You saved us $4 million last quarter on the linen contract alone. I didn't say anything. That is why I am accepting this disclosure now, he said. Not because you were caught, but because you came to me. He reached for his phone. I am calling compliance. You are recused from the Bancroft account immediately, effective this second. Do not open the file. Do not answer their emails. I understand. Who is your senior analyst, Don Halverson? Greg nodded. Don can handle the audit. We will review everything. Every invoice, every delivery, every certification for the last 6 years. He looked me in the eye. If the audit is clean, you keep your job. You will get a formal reprimand for the late disclosure, but you stay. And if it is not clean, I asked. Greg didn't blink. Then we have a different conversation. I walked out of his office. My legs felt like water. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in the handicap stall. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal of the door dispenser. I had done it. I had lit the match. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. The weekend passed in a blur of anxiety and silence. I stayed at Don's apartment. Keith called 14 times on Friday night after he was served with the preservation order. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that ranged from pleading to screaming. I didn't listen to them. I just forwarded them to Ward. Monday came. I was back at my desk, working on a linen vendor renewal, trying to pretend my entire career wasn't hanging by a thread. At 4 o'clock, Dawn appeared at the entrance of my cubicle. She didn't have her coffee mug. She didn't have her usual tired smile. She looked pale. Jen, she said. I looked up. The linen contract on my screen blurred. What is it? Come see this. I followed her to her cubicle. It was a mess of post-it notes and stacks of paper, but her computer screen was organized chaos. A massive spreadsheet was open, thousands of rows of data. Dawn sat down and pointed at a cluster of cells highlighted in bright red. I have been auditing the 2023 compliance issue, she said. The sterilization packaging. Remember, I nodded. They switched suppliers without notifying us. The packaging was tearing. I gave them 30 days to remediate. Right, Dawn said. And they submitted a certificate of compliance from a testing lab. Apex Packaging Solutions. She clicked a tab. A PDF opened. It looked official. Logo at the top, certification number, signature of a lab director. So I asked. Jan, Dawn said. She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Fear. I called Apex Packaging Solutions to verify the certificate number, and the phone number goes to a Verizon voicemail. My stomach dropped. Maybe they moved, I suggested. It has been a year. Dawn shook her head. She started typing. I searched the Ohio Secretary of State database. Nothing. I searched Delaware. Nothing. I checked Google Maps for the address listed on the letterhead. She spun the monitor around so I could see the street view. It was a strip mall in Reynoldsburg. The address corresponded to a vacant storefront between a vape shop and a nail salon. There is no lab, Jandon whispered. Apex Packaging Solutions does not exist. I stare at the screen. The empty storefront. The vape shop. Phyllis, I said. She faked it, Dawn said. She made up a company. She made up a lab. She forged a certification for medical equipment packaging in a hospital system. She clicked back to the spreadsheet. And here is the kicker, she said. Her voice was trembling. Look at the billing. She pointed to a column of numbers. After they submitted the fake certification, they billed us a surcharge for upgraded materials. $47,000 over 6 months. I leaned closer. The numbers swam before my eyes. She charged us extra for the fake packaging, Dawn nodded. She billed Mercy Health $47,000 for a safety upgrade that never happened, verified by a lab that doesn't exist. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a contract dispute. This wasn't just sloppy paperwork. This was fraud. This was a felony. Phyllis faked the compliance documents, I whispered. Dawn looked at me. Not just faked, she billed for it. Jen, this is insurance fraud. This is healthcare fraud. I thought about the music box. I thought about the slab. I thought about the way Phyllis had looked at me for 9 years like I was something she had scraped off her shoe. I thought I was protecting her business, I said. Dawn shook her head. You weren't protecting a business January. You were protecting a crime scene. I stood up. The cubicle walls seemed to be closing in. I have to tell Greg, I said. Dawn stood up too. Yes, she said. And Greg has to report it to the state health department. She put a hand on my arm. Jan, she said quietly, this is bigger than your divorce. If they find out she falsifies safety data. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I looked at the empty storefront on the screen again. Apex Packaging Solutions. A phantom shield for a real danger. Phyllis had built her empire on fear and Estee Lauder, but underneath it all the foundation was rotten. Print it, I said. Dawn hit the key. The printer whirred to life. I watched the paper slide out. 1 sheet. 2 sheets. The evidence of a lie that cost $47,000 and risked patient safety. I picked up the stack. The pages were warm. Happy birthday, Phyllis, I thought. I walked toward Greg's office. I didn't look down. I didn't hide my face. The paper trail ended here, and the fire was about to start. Monday morning arrived with the sterile, quiet dread of a hospital waiting room. I sat in the hallway outside Judge Barlow's chambers in the Franklin County Courthouse. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a sound that felt like a drill against my temple. I was wearing my navy blazer, the one I usually reserved for aggressive vendor negotiations. It felt appropriate. To my right, Ward Collier was organizing a stack of files on the wooden bench. He moved with the calm efficiency of a man who had spent 30 years watching marriages decompose into paperwork. To my left, about 10 feet away, sat Phyllis. She was wearing the Emerald Street John's suit, the same one she had worn on her birthday, the same one she was wearing when she hit me. She sat with her back so straight she looked like she had swallowed a coat hanger. Beside her, Greg Loomis, her attorney, was whispering something in her ear. He was a man I recognized from the society pages, known for his silver hair and his ability to make DUIs disappear for the country club set. And behind them, sitting alone on a bench against the wall, was Keith. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his tie was knotted, slightly askew, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and too much scotch. He was staring at his shoes. He hadn't looked at me once since I walked in. I touched my left cheek. The bruise was fading into a map of yellow and green hidden under layers of foundation, but I could still feel the heat of it. Ward stood up. It is time, he said. We walked into the hearing room. It was smaller than I expected, just a long table, a few chairs, and the judge's raised bench. It smelled of old paper and floor wax. Judge Barlow was a man in his late 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the tired expression of someone who had heard every lie ever invented. He looked over his spectacles as we took our seats. In the matter of Kinsey versus Bancroft, he said, petition for emergency protective order. Ward stood. He didn't waste time on theatrics. He simply laid out the timeline. Your Honor, on the evening of November 9th, the respondent, Phyllis Bancroft, struck the petitioner Janet Kinsey across the face with an open hand. This occurred in front of 30 witnesses. He placed the photos I had taken on the judge's bench. Exhibit A, photos taken 2 hours after the incident. Exhibit B, photos taken by the Bexley Police Department 48 hours later. Craig Loomis stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a smooth, practiced motion. Your Honor, this is a gross overreaction to a minor family disagreement. Mrs. Bancroft is a 69-year-old grandmother and a pillar of the Bexley business community. The idea that she poses a physical threat to a woman 20 years her junior is absurd. Ward didn't even look at him. She is turning 70, counsel, Ward said, his voice level. And 70-year-olds do not get a pass on assault. We have photographs. We have a police report. We have 3 witness statements from guests at the party who confirmed the unprovoked nature of the attack. He paused, then played his ace. And, Your Honor, we have a video recording of the incident taken by the petitioner's husband at the respondent's specific instruction. Judge Barlow looked up from the photos. He looked at Phyllis. Mrs. Bancroft, do you dispute that you struck your daughter-in-law? Loomis leaned in to whisper to Phyllis, but she shook her head slightly. Her jaw was set like concrete. Loomis cleared his throat. Mrs. Bancroft acknowledges a momentary lapse in judgment during a highly emotional family gathering. However, she was provoked. Provoked, the judge repeated. By what? By a gift that was intended to cause distress, Loomis said. Ward stepped forward. The gift was a vintage music box that played the respondent's wedding song. If that is provocation, Your Honor, then Hallmark should be out of business. Judge Barlow took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mr. Loomis, does your client understand that striking another person is a crime? It was a lapse, Your Honor. It was assault, the judge corrected. And the fact that she had her son recorded suggests it was premeditated, not a lapse. He looked at Phyllis. Mrs. Bancroft, I am granting the temporary protective order. You are to stay 500 feet away from Mrs. Kinsey at all times. No contact, no phone calls, no texts. No third-party messages through your son. Phyllis stared at the judge. She looked like he had just spoken to her in a foreign language, and Mr. Loomis, the judge, continued, his eyes shifting to Keith in the back of the room. I'm noting the presence of Mr. Bancroft. While he is not named in this order today, the court views his participation in the event with concern. If there is any harassment from his quarter, we will amend the order to include him. Bang! The gavel hit the wood. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. Phyllis stood up. She smoothed her skirt. As she turned to leave, her eyes met mine. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw pure, unadulterated rage. It was hot and bright and terrifying. Then she blinked, and the Estee Lauder smile was backplastered over the cracks. She walked out. Keith followed her like a dog that had been kicked but didn't know where else to go. Ward closed his file. Step 1, he said. I looked at the empty doorway. Step 1 was over. But I knew Phyllis. She wasn't retreating. She was reloading. Wednesday came with a cold biting wind. I arrived at Mercy Health corporate headquarters at 8 in the morning. I went straight to Greg Noonan's office. This was step 2. The office was quiet. Greg sat behind his desk looking grim. Dawn was sitting in one of the guest chairs, a stack of spreadsheets on her lap. I took the chair next to her. I was not here to speak. I had recused myself from the Bancroft account. I was here only as a witness, required by compliance to be present for factual verification, if needed. Greg looked at the clock. 11 a.m. Ready? He asked. Dawn nodded. She placed a single sheet of paper in the center of the desk. The audit summary. Greg pressed the button on the speakerphone. He dialed a number I knew by heart. Ring, ring. Bancroft Medical, this is Phyllis. Her voice filled the room. It was bright professional, the voice of a woman who believed she was untouchable. Phyllis, this is Greg Noonan at Mercy Health, Greg said. I have Dawn Halverson, our senior analyst, and Jan Kinsey here as well. There was a pause. A beat of silence where the air pressure in the room seemed to drop. Jan is there, Phyllis asked. Her tone had shifted. It was sharper now. Mrs. Kinsey is present for compliance purposes, Greg said. We also have your CFO, Carl Meeks, on the line. Carl, are you there? Yes, sir. Carl's voice was shaky. He sounded like a man standing on a trapdoor. Greg leaned forward. Phyllis, we are calling regarding the audit of your vendor contract, specifically the compliance remediation from last year. Oh, that, Phyllis said, dismissing it with a laugh. We resolved that months ago. The packaging issue. It was a supplier glitch. Dawn leaned toward the speakerphone. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, but her voice was steady. Mrs. Bancroft, this is Dawn. In reviewing the file, we looked at the certificate of compliance you submitted from Apex Packaging Solutions. Yes, Phyllis said. A certified lab. Top of the line, Mrs. Bancroft Dawn said, Apex Packaging Solutions does not exist. Silence. Not a pause. A void. Dawn continued reading from her notes. The address listed on the certificate belongs to a vacant storefront in Reynoldsburg. The phone number is a personal cell phone that is no longer in service. There is no LLC registration in Ohio, Delaware, or any other state. Carl Phyllis snapped. Her voice was like a whip. What is she talking about? You handled the paperwork. I submitted what you gave me, Phyllis Carl stammered. You handed me the folder. You said it was taken care of. Carl, don't you dare, Mrs. Bancroft, Greg interrupted. His voice was low and hard. We also reviewed the billing. Following the submission of this fraudulent certificate, Bancroft Medical billed Mercy Health a surcharge of $47,000 for upgraded materials. Materials verified by a lab that does not exist. The silence returned, thicker this time. I stared at the speakerphone. I could imagine Phyllis in her office sitting in her high-backed leather chair gripping the receiver. I could imagine the blood draining from her face. There must be some mistake, Phyllis said. Her voice was tighter, higher. Our compliance record with Mercy Health has been impeccable for 6 years. Greg looked at me. I kept my face blank. Your compliance record has 2 flags, Greg said, both of which were resolved through internal advocacy by a staff member who has since recused herself from your account. Phyllis made a sound, a sharp intake of breath. She knew. She couldn't see me, but she knew I was sitting there. She knew I hadn't advocated for her this time. She knew I had let the axe fall. Who? She whispered. Who was the staff member? That is not relevant to this call, Mrs. Bancroft, Greg said. It is relevant to me, Phyllis shouted. The mask was gone. I want to know who is behind this. I want to know who is trying to destroy my company. Greg didn't flinch. What is relevant, Mrs. Bancroft is that Mercy Health is initiating formal termination of vendor contract MH2019-0847, effective in 30 days per Section 14.2 of our agreement. No, Phyllis said. You can't. That is 60% of our revenue. 68% I thought. We have served this hospital for 15 years. Phyllis yelled. My husband Gerald built this relationship from nothing. You cannot just cut us off because of some clerical error. It is not a clerical error, Mrs. Bancroft, Greg said. It is fraud. Carl Meeks started crying. I could hear it over the line, a soft, pathetic sobbing. I am hanging up now, Greg said. You will receive the formal notice via certified mail. You tell whoever is doing this. Phyllis hissed, her voice vibrating with venom. You tell her that she has no idea who she is messing with. I will sue this hospital. I will sue everyone in that room. I will. Greg pressed the button. Click. The line went dead. The silence in Greg's office was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation system and my own heartbeat thudding slow and heavy in my ears. Dawn let out a long breath. She reached for her water bottle. Her hand was shaking. Greg looked at the phone, then at me. Yan, he said. Can you stay for a moment, Dawn? Thank you. Dawn stood up. She squeezed my shoulder once hard and walked out. Greg waited until the door clicked shut. He picked up a pen and turned it over in his fingers. Off the record, Jan, he said. I nodded. Did you know? No, I said. My voice sounded rusty. I suspected the 2023 resolution was too clean. I should have audited deeper. I didn't because she was family. Greg nodded. He looked at the family photo on his desk. That is the most honest thing anyone has said in this building in 5 years, he said. He leaned back in his chair. You are still employed January. Compliance is satisfied with your disclosure and your recusal. But you need to know something. What? We have a legal obligation to report this to the State Health Department. Fraudulent safety certifications are a public health issue. I felt a chill go through me. The state will open an investigation, Greg said. They will look at everything Bancroft Medical has ever done. He looked me in the eye. Phyllis isn't just losing a contract, January. She's going to be fighting for her freedom. I stared at my hands. They were clasped in my lap, white-knuckled. I thought I would feel triumph. I thought I would feel a surge of justice, of vindication, for the slap, for the insults, for the years of being treated like furniture. I didn't. I felt like I had just pulled the pin on a grenade and was still holding it in my hand. I felt the weight of the destruction I had unleashed. I understand, I said. Greg stood up. Take the rest of the day, January, go home. I walked out of the office. The hallway seemed longer than usual. I went to the elevator. I pressed the button for the parking garage. My phone buzzed. A text from Keith. Mom is screaming. She says you killed the company. What did you do? I looked at the screen. I didn't kill the company, Keith. I just turned on the lights. I deleted the text. I got into my car and sat there for a long time. I looked at the passenger seat where my purse sat. Inside was the protective order. 68%! Gone in 30 seconds. Phyllis was right about one thing. Gerald had built that company from nothing. And now, because she couldn't stop herself from needing to control everything, because she had to fake a lab result to save a few $1,000s, she had burned it to the ground. And I had handed her the match. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I drove out of the garage and into the gray afternoon. The war wasn't over. Phyllis was wounded, and a wounded predator is the most dangerous thing in the world. She would come for me. She would come for my job, my reputation, my sanity. Let her come. I touched the prenup folder in my bag. I touched the phone with the video. I was ready. But as I merged onto the highway, I couldn't shake the image of the music box sitting on her living room floor. Broken, playing a song for a ghost. "Happy birthday, Phyllis," I whispered. I turned on the radio to drown out the silence. Thursday afternoon sat heavy in the office, the kind of gray relentless mid-November day where the lights seem too bright and the air feels recycled. I was at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet for hospital linens. I had been recused from the Bancroft account for 48 hours. My inbox was usually a steady stream of vendor updates and purchase orders. Ping, a notification slid into the bottom right corner of my monitor. High priority. The red exclamation point blinked like a warning light. From Craig Loomis, attorney at law. CC Greg Noonan, VP Operations. Sarah Jenkins, General Counsel. Thomas Wright, Chairman of the Board. Subject formal complaint regarding conflict of interest and retaliatory termination by Janet Kinsey. My hand froze on the mouse. The blood seemed to drain out of my fingers, leaving them cold and stiff. I opened it. The letter was attached as a PDF. I read the preview pane. The words jumped out at me, sharp and venomous, alleging a calculated campaign of professional retaliation, misuse of corporate position to settle a personal domestic dispute, demanding the immediate termination of Mrs. Kinsey's employment, intent to seek damages in the amount of $5 million for lost revenue and reputational harm. Phyllis. She knew. Someone had told her. Maybe Keith, maybe Carl Meeks, maybe she had just connected the dots. She knew I had fired the kill shot, and now she was firing back. I picked up my phone. My fingers felt thick, clumsy. I dialed Ward. "She's suing," I said as soon as he answered. Or, threatening to. She sent a letter to my employer, to the general counsel, to the board chair. "She is accusing me of retaliation." Ward didn't sound surprised. He sounded tired. "Expected," he said. "Expected, Ward." She CC'd the chairman of the board. "If they believe her, Jan, listen to me." Ward's voice was calm, a heavy anchor in the rising storm. "You disclosed the conflict voluntarily. You recused yourself. Dawn conducted the audit independently. The fraud is real. The fake lab is real. The billing surcharge is real." "But she's saying I orchestrated it," I whispered. "She's saying I did it because of the slap." "She is panicking," Ward said. "A $2.1 million contract just evaporated. She is watching her house burn down, and she is throwing rocks at the firefighters." It is a Hail Mary. January, I looked through the glass wall of my office. Greg Noonan walked past. He usually waved. Today, he didn't even turn his head. He looked straight ahead, his jaw set, holding a stack of papers that looked suspiciously like the printout of Craig Loomis's email. But I said, my voice trembling, "But Ward, finish for me. She is going to make the next 2 weeks very unpleasant." Friday morning, the Human Resources conference room felt like a vault. No windows, beige walls. The low electric hum of a ventilation system that recycled anxiety. I sat on one side of the table. Ward was next to me, his fountain pen uncapped and ready. Dawn was on my other side, a stack of file folders in front of her. Across from us sat Pamela Roth, the director of HR. She was a woman who smiled with her mouth, but never with her eyes. She had the printed complaint from Phyllis's lawyer in front of her. Mrs. Kinsey. Pamela began adjusting her reading glasses. "The allegations here are severe. Mr. Loomis claims that the termination of the Bancroft medical contract was a direct result of a personal family altercation on November 9th. It was," I started to say, but Ward placed a hand on my arm. The termination was a result of fraud, Ward said. Pamela looked at him, then back at me. We need to establish the timeline, she said. The incident occurred on Saturday. The disclosure happened on Friday. The termination happened Wednesday. The timing suggests a correlation. Dawn leaned forward. She opened the top folder. Miss Roth, she said. Her voice was steady, the voice of a woman who trusted numbers more than people. I conducted the audit. I found the discrepancy. Pamela looked at Dawn. And you report to Mrs. Kinsey, I do, Dawn said. But Mrs. Kinsey was recused. The findings are objective. Dawn slid a paper across the table. This is the certificate from Apex Packaging Solutions, she said. It is a fabrication. The company does not exist. The lab does not exist. Pamela picked up the paper. She studied it. And this, Dawn continued, sliding a second sheet, is the billing record. Bancroft Medical charged us $47,000 for upgrades verified by this non-existent lab. The room was silent. Pamela looked at the papers, then at the complaint letter. Mrs. Kinsey, Pamela said, looking up. If Bancroft Medical had not submitted fraudulent documentation, would the contract have been terminated? No, I said. I met her eyes. I would have reported the conflict of interest and recused myself. The contract itself was performing adequately outside of the compliance issues. So the termination was driven by fraud, not by your personal situation. Correct. Ward tapped the table with his pen. And the fraud was discovered by Miss Halverson, not by my client. My client was recused. The timeline is documented. Pamela closed the file. She took off her glasses. We will complete our internal review by Monday, she said. Mrs. Kinsey, you are not suspended. You are not under investigation. I let out a breath. However, Pamela added, her eyes narrowing slightly. Given the litigation threat and the sensitive nature of this vendor, I would recommend keeping a low profile. I looked at the beige walls. Keeping a low profile, that was all I had done for 9 years. I had made myself small. I had hidden in the corners of photos. I had sat by the door at parties. I stood up. My legs felt heavy. Understood, I said. I walked back to my office. People looked away when I passed. The office grapevine moved faster than fiber optics. Everyone knew I was the woman who sued her mother-in-law and torched the biggest vendor in the system. I survived the day. I answered emails. I approved linen orders. I pretended my life wasn't a car crash happening in slow motion. At 7 o'clock, I drove home. The house in Upper Arlington was dark. I hadn't turned on the porch light when I left that morning. The window stared back at me like empty eyes. I walked into the kitchen. I didn't take off my coat. It was cold inside, the kind of damp chill that settles into a house when the warmth has gone out of the people living in it. Headlights swept across the kitchen wall. Keith. I heard his car door slam. Then the front door opened. He walked into the kitchen. He was still wearing his suit from work, but his tie was pulled loose and his top button was undone. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 5 days. His face was gray, unshaven. He stopped when he saw me sitting at the table. He was holding a large manila envelope. He tossed it onto the table between us. It landed with a heavy final thud. What is this? I asked. Keith pulled out a chair and sat down. He didn't look at me. He looked at the envelope. Divorce papers, he said. I stared at the yellow clasp. Mom's lawyer drafted them, he said. I am filing on Monday. I reached out and opened the envelope. I pulled out the stack of documents. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner Keith Bancroft. Respondent Janet Kinsey. I flipped to the financial section. My eyes scanned the legalese. Division of assets. 50-50 split of all marital property. 50-50 split of all retirement accounts. 50-50 split of all cash savings. I stopped. Keith, I said, did you read this? He rubbed his face. Yeah, 50-50. It is standard. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I had shared a bed with for nearly a decade. The man who sat next to me at funerals and weddings. Did you tell your mother about the prenup? I asked. Keith frowned. What prenup? The one she made me sign, I said. The one her lawyer drafted. He waved a hand dismissively. That was just for the house and the inheritance. No, Keith. I flipped the page. It was for everything. Separate property remained separate. Income remained separate. Keith blinked. He looked confused. Mom said it is community property. She said we are entitled to half your savings. We, I repeated, not you, we. She needs the liquidity, Jan Kit said, his voice rising. You killed the contract. The company is in freefall. We need cash to float the payroll until the sale goes through. So you are divorcing me to pay your mother's payroll. Keith slammed his hand on the table. I am divorcing you because you are vindictive. You destroyed my family's legacy because of a slap I looked at the papers. Petitioner Keith Bancroft. Mom says it is better this way, he said, his voice dropping. A clean break. A clean break, I said. I stood up. The kitchen felt very small suddenly. Your mother decides to end your marriage and you call it a clean break. She is not deciding, Keith yelled. I am deciding, Keith, I said softly. You have not made a single decision in this marriage that your mother didn't approve first, he flinched. It was physical, a jerk of his head as if I had struck him. I pushed the envelope back across the table. I will have Ward respond by Monday, I said. But Keith, I need you to understand something. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I protected your mother's company for 6 years, I said. I saved it twice. I hid her mistakes. I fixed her messes. And she thanked me by calling me worthless trash and hitting me in front of 30 people. She didn't mean, and you recorded it. The silence that followed was total. The furnace clicked on in the basement, a low rumble beneath our feet. That is just how Mom is right, Keith. He put his head in his hands. His shoulders started to shake. He was crying. I watched him. I watched my husband weep at our kitchen table, and I felt nothing. That was the terrifying part. That was the moment I knew it was truly over. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel betrayal. I didn't feel sadness. I felt like I was watching a stranger on a bus. Is this what freedom feels like, or is this just what breaking feels like? I couldn't tell the difference. I walked past him. I went upstairs to the bedroom. I took a suitcase from the closet. The red carry-on. I packed methodically. 3 suits, jeans, sweaters, my laptop, the folder with the prenup. I went to the kitchen shelf and took down the wooden recipe box, my mother's box. The index card for banana bread was right on top, Patricia's handwriting fading in the corner. I carried the suitcase downstairs. Keith hadn't moved. He was still sitting at the table, the divorce papers spread out in front of him like a surrender treaty. I am going to Dawn's, I said. He looked up. His face was wet, blotchy. Jan, he said. Goodbye, Keith. Canopy go. I opened the back door. The cold night air hit me. I walked out to my car. I put the suitcase in the passenger seat. I looked back at the house. Every light I had turned on was still glowing. The kitchen was bright. The bedroom was bright. I didn't turn them off. That was Keith's job now. I backed out of the driveway. November 22nd. I drove down the street past the manicured lawns and the dark windows of neighbors who probably already knew. I had lost my home. I had lost my marriage. I had lost the family I spent 30 years trying to find. But as I turned the corner, leaving the house behind, I touched the recipe box on the seat beside me. I had lost everything that wasn't mine, and for the first time in 9 years, the only thing in the car was me. Saturday morning, in Dawn's apartment smelled like old dust and strong coffee. I had spent the night on her beige microfiber couch, staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looked like the state of Florida. I hadn't slept. My phone sat on the coffee table screen dark, a silent brick that held the wreckage of my entire life. Keith's last text message from Friday night was still unread. It just said Jan followed by nothing. He never finished the sentence. He never finished anything. Dawn walked into the living room at 7. She was wearing flannel pajama pants and a t-shirt from a 5K run she did 3 years ago. Her hair was a bird's nest. She didn't say good morning. She just handed me a mug that said Mom's Juice on the side. I sat up. The blanket slid off my shoulders. I was still wearing yesterday's blazer, now wrinkled and smelling of stale car air. You know what the worst part of my divorce was? Dawn asked. She sat on the floor, leaning her back against the couch near my feet. She blew on her coffee. The fighting, I guessed. My voice sounded like gravel. Dawn shook her head. The quiet, she said. The first Saturday morning, when nobody needed me to be anywhere. Nobody needed breakfast. Nobody needed a shirt ironed. I sat in this kitchen for 4 hours and just watched the sun move across the floor. She took a sip. I couldn't figure out who I was without someone to take care of, she said. I looked at the water stain on the ceiling. I don't know who I am without them, I whispered. The words felt dangerous, like admitting a crime. That is not true, Dawn said sharply. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were clear fears. You are the woman who walks into a vendor meeting with a $4 million company and makes them agree to our terms in 40 minutes. You are the woman who caught a billing error that saved the cardiology department $12,000 last month. That is my job, Dawn, I said. That is not me. Dawn set her mug down on the carpet. Yan, you are your job. I flinched. No, listen, she said. You are the person who reads every clause. You are the person who finds every discrepancy. You are the person who protects people from getting ripped off, from getting hurt, from making mistakes. She reached out and tapped my knee. That is not a job title, January. That is a character trait. You are a protector. I stared at her. A protector. I protected Mom when she was sick, managing her meds, fighting with insurance companies. I protected Keith's family for 9 years, smoothing over their roughness, hiding their flaws. I protected Phyllis from her own fraud until I couldn't anymore. The problem was never that I protected people. The problem was who I chose to protect. Dawn stood up. I am making pancakes, she said. Get in the shower. You smell like a deposition. I spent the day in a fog, moving from the couch to the kitchen and back. But when night fell, the silence, Dawn talked about settled over the apartment. Dawn went to bed at 10. I went into the guest room. My suitcase was open on the floor, spilling my life out onto the rug. I knelt beside it. I didn't want to look at the clothes. I didn't want to look at the laptop. I reached for the wooden box, my mother's recipe box. It was pine-stained dark, with age the corners worn smooth by her hands. Her initials, P.L., were burned into the lid with a wood-burning kit I had bought her for Christmas when I was 12. I opened it. The smell hit me first. Vanilla. Oh, paper. The faint sweet ghost of cinnamon. I flipped through the cards. Banana bread. Pot roast. Lemon bars. The handwriting on the early cards was firm looping cursive in blue ink. The later cards, the ones from when she was sick, were written in pencil, the letters shaky and faint. I pulled them out one by one, stacking them on the floor. I needed to see something that was real, something that didn't lie. At the very bottom of the box, underneath a recipe for Christmas sugar cookies, was a piece of folded notebook paper. I frowned. I had never emptied the box completely. I unfolded the paper. It was brittle, tearing slightly at the crease. The handwriting was jagged. It was written near the end. Junbug, if you're reading this, I am probably gone and you are probably mad at me for leaving you with so much mess. I am sorry I had to leave you so early. I felt a lump form in my throat, hard and hot. But baby, the note continued, don't spend your life looking for what I couldn't give you. You have a big heart, but you try to fill it with people who don't fit. I wiped my eyes. The ink was blurring. Family isn't something you find, Janbug. It is something you build. You are enough. You have always been enough. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not even me. Love, Mom. I sat on the floor of Dawn's guest room, holding the paper with both hands. Family isn't something you find. It is something you build. For 30 years, I had replayed her deathbed promise in my head. Find a real family. I thought it was an instruction. I thought it was a quest. I had looked for a family like I was looking for a lost set of keys, and when I found the Bancrofts, I forced myself to fit into their lock, even when it broke me. But she hadn't said find, she said build. I looked around the room. Dawn sleeping in the next room, who had made me pancakes and told me the truth. Ward, who had spent his Saturday reviewing my file because he thought Gerald would have wanted someone to look out for me. I had been building a family this whole time. I just couldn't see it because I was staring at Phyllis's chandelier. I pulled the note to my chest. I curled forward, my forehead resting on my knees. The tears came then. Not the jagged, ugly sobbing from the other day. This was different. This was a release. It was a river breaking a dam, washing away the silt and the debris of 9 years. I cried for the girl who thought she wasn't enough. I cried for the woman who sat by the door at parties. I cried for the wasted time. And then the crying stopped. The room was quiet. I sat up. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I picked up the note. I folded it carefully and put it in the pocket of my blazer hanging on the chair. I am enough, I whispered. I stood up. I walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights of Clintonville were glowing. I wasn't looking for a family anymore. I was looking for a lawyer. Sunday morning, the city of Columbus felt different. The air was crisp, washed clean by the rain. I drove to Ward Collier's office at 9. The streets were empty, quiet, except for the sound of church bells ringing from the cathedral down the block. The office building was unlocked, but there was no receptionist. I walked straight back to Ward's office. The light was different on a Sunday. Instead of the harsh weekday glare, the room was filled with a soft golden dust. Ward was sitting at his desk, but he wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing khakis and a red Ohio State polo shirt. It was the first time I had seen him look like a person, not an institution. He looked up when I walked in. He had a legal pad in front of him already half full of notes. "Morning, Jen," he said. I sat down. I placed my own legal pad on the desk. I had been writing since 4 in the morning. "I have a plan," I said. Ward put his pen down. He leaned back, interlacing his fingers. "I am listening. I don't want a war, Ward. I don't want to destroy her." Ward raised an eyebrow. After the letter she sent, after the fraud, I shook my head. The fraud is her problem. The state will handle that. The contract is Mercy Health's problem. That is done. I tapped my notepad. I want what is mine. I want the divorce finalized with the prenup enforced. Every cent. I want the protective order made permanent. And I want the civil suit to compensate me for my medical costs and my therapy and the time I missed work. And Ward asked. "And nothing," I said. "I don't want punitive damages. I don't want to bankrupt her personally. I don't want to drag this out for 2 years in the press." Ward frowned. "Jan, you have her by the throat. We could take everything." "I know," I said. "And that is why I am letting go." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the empty street. If I destroy her, I am just playing her game. I am just another Bancroft fighting in the mud. I am not a Bancroft. I am Jan Kinsey. I turned back to him. "I want to walk away, Ward, cleanly, with my name, my money, and my dignity. That is the only victory that matters." Ward looked at me for a long time. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner. He picked up his pen. He tapped it against the desk, a slow rhythmic sound. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "in 31 years of practice, that is the most dangerous thing a plaintiff can be." "What reasonable?" he said. "Judges love reasonable. Juries love reasonable. And bullies like Phyllis, they don't know what to do with reasonable. It terrifies them." He pulled a fresh sheet of paper from his drawer. "Okay," he said. "Here is the strategy for Friday." He held up 3 fingers again. 1. The video. We show the assault. It is undeniable. 2. Keith's complicity. We show he recorded it on instruction. That breaks any claim that this was a mutual altercation. 3. Your recusal. We show the judge that you disclosed the conflict, step back and let the system work. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "Phyllis's lawyer is going to argue retaliation," Ward said. "He is going to paint you as a vengeful ex-wife. We are going to show the judge a woman who followed the rules, a woman who protected her employer even when her personal life was exploding." "That is not retaliation," I said. "That is integrity." "Exactly," Ward said. "And the fraud, we let the fraud speak for itself. We don't even have to bring it up. The fact that she's under state investigation will be in the judge's briefing packet." I nodded. It felt right. It felt clean. "And what happens to Phyllis?" I asked. Ward sighed. He looked at the diploma on his wall. "Criminal assault charge most likely. The protective order will be permanent. The civil judgment will go against her. And the state health department." He shrugged. "That is a buzzsaw, January. They will tear that company apart. Bancroft Medical will be in receivership by Christmas. It will be acquired. And the employees I asked, the 42 people Keith was crying about, Companies survive ownership changes, Ward said. Employees usually keep their jobs. Phyllis won't. She will be barred from operating a medical supply company in Ohio. I felt a pang of sadness, not for Phyllis, but for the waste of it all. I can't save them, I said quietly. No, Ward said. You can't. You could barely save yourself. I touched the pocket of my blazer. I could feel the crinkle of the note inside. You are enough. Ward stood up. He walked around the desk and extended his hand. We are ready, he said. I shook his hand. His grip was warm and solid. Ward walked me to the door. The Sunday sun was brighter now, hitting the pavement with a sharp, clear light. Jen Ward said, as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I turned back. Gerald would have been proud of you. I smiled. It felt strange on my face, like a muscle I hadn't used in years. You knew him well, I asked. Ward smiled back, a sad, knowing smile. Well enough to know he married the wrong woman, he said. And his son did too. But for different reasons. I walked to my car. Tomorrow was Monday, day 16. The hearing. Everything was about to end. Or maybe for the first time, everything was about to begin. Saturday morning in Dawn's apartment smelled like old dust and strong coffee. I had spent the night on her beige microfiber couch, staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like the state of Florida. I had not slept. My phone sat on the coffee table screen, dark, a silent brick that held the wreckage of my entire life. Keith's last text message from Friday night was still unread. It just said Jan followed by nothing. He never finished the sentence. He never finished anything. Dawn walked into the living room at 7. She was wearing flannel pajama pants and a t-shirt from a 5-kilometer run she did 3 years ago. Her hair was a bird's nest. She did not say good morning. She just handed me a mug that said Mom's Juice on the side. I sat up. The blanket slid off my shoulders. I was still wearing yesterday's blazer, now wrinkled and smelling of stale car air. You know what the worst part of my divorce was? Dawn asked. She sat on the floor, leaning her back against the couch near my feet. She blew on her coffee. The fighting, I guessed. My voice sounded like gravel. Dawn shook her head. The quiet, she said. The first Saturday morning when nobody needed me to be anywhere. Nobody needed breakfast. Nobody needed a shirt ironed. I sat in this kitchen for 4 hours and just watched the sun move across the floor. She took a sip. I could not figure out who I was without someone to take care of, she said. I looked at the water stain on the ceiling. I don't know who I am without them, I whispered. The words felt dangerous, like admitting a crime. That is not true, Dawn said sharply. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were clear, fierce. You are the woman who walks into a vendor meeting with a $4 million company and makes them agree to our terms in 40 minutes. You are the woman who caught a billing error that saved the cardiology department $12,000 last month. That is my job, Dawn, I said. That is not me. Dawn set her mug down on the carpet. Jan, you are your job. I flinched. No, listen, she said. You are the person who reads every clause. You are the person who finds every discrepancy. You are the person who protects people from getting ripped off, from getting hurt, from making mistakes. She reached out and tapped my knee. That is not a job title, January. That is a character trait. You are a protector. I stared at her. A protector. I protected Mom when she was sick, managing her medications, fighting with insurance companies. I protected Keith's family for 9 years, smoothing over their roughness, hiding their flaws. I protected Phyllis from her own fraud until I could not anymore. The problem was never that I protected people. The problem was who I chose to protect. Dawn stood up. I am making pancakes, she said. Get in the shower. You smell like a deposition. I spent the day in a fog, moving from the couch to the kitchen and back. But when night fell, the silence Dawn talked about settled over the apartment. Dawn went to bed at 10. I went into the guest room. My suitcase was open on the floor, spilling my life out onto the rug. I knelt beside it. I did not want to look at the clothes. I did not want to look at the laptop. I reached for the wooden box, my mother's recipe box. It was pine-stained dark, with age, the corners worn smooth by her hands. Her initials, P.L., were burned into the lid with a wood-burning kit I had bought her for Christmas when I was 12. I opened it. The smell hit me first. Vanilla, old paper, the faint sweet ghost of cinnamon. I flipped through the cards. Banana bread, pot roast, lemon bars. The handwriting on the early cards was firm looping cursive in blue ink. The later cards, the ones from when she was sick, were written in pencil, the letters shaky and faint. I pulled them out one by one, stacking them on the floor. I needed to see something that was real, something that did not lie. At the very bottom of the box, underneath a recipe for Christmas, sugar cookies, was a piece of folded notebook paper. I frowned. I had never emptied the box completely. I unfolded the paper. It was brittle, tearing slightly at the crease. The handwriting was jagged. It was written near the end. Janbug. If you are reading this, I am probably gone, and you are probably mad at me for leaving you with so much mess. I am sorry I had to leave you so early. I felt a lump form in my throat, hard and hot. But baby, the note continued, don't spend your life looking for what I couldn't give you. You have a big heart, but you try to fill it with people who don't fit. I wiped my eyes. The ink was blurring. Family isn't something you find, Janbug. It is something you build. You are enough. You have always been enough. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not even me. Love, Mom. I sat on the floor of Dawn's guest room, holding the paper with both hands. Family isn't something you find. It is something you build. For 30 years, I had replayed her deathbed promise in my head. Find a real family. I thought it was an instruction. I thought it was a quest. I had looked for a family like I was looking for a lost set of keys, and when I found the Bancrofts, I forced myself to fit into their lock even when it broke me. But she had not said find, she said build. I looked around the room. Dawn sleeping in the next room, who had made me pancakes and told me the truth. Ward, who had spent his Saturday reviewing my file because he thought Gerald would have wanted someone to look out for me. I had been building a family this whole time. I just could not see it because I was staring at Phyllis's chandelier. I pulled the note to my chest. I curled forward my forehead, resting on my knees. The tears came then. Not the jagged, ugly sobbing from the other day. This was different. This was a release. It was a river breaking a dam, washing away the silt and the debris of 9 years. I cried for the girl who thought she was not enough. I cried for the woman who sat by the door at parties. I cried for the wasted time. And then the crying stopped. The room was quiet. I sat up. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I picked up the note. I folded it carefully and put it in the pocket of my blazer hanging on the chair. I am enough, I whispered. I stood up. I walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights of Clintonville were glowing. I was not looking for a family anymore. I was looking for a lawyer. Sunday morning, the city of Columbus felt different. The air was crisp, washed clean by the rain. I drove toward Collier's office at 9. The streets were empty, quiet, except for the sound of church bells ringing from the cathedral down the block. The office building was unlocked, but there was no receptionist. I walked straight back towards office. The light was different on a Sunday. Instead of the harsh weekday glare, the room was filled with a soft golden dust. Ward was sitting at his desk, but he was not wearing a suit. He was wearing khakis and a red Ohio State polo shirt. It was the first time I had seen him look like a person, not an institution. He looked up when I walked in. He had a legal pad in front of him, already half full of notes. "Morning, Jan," he said. I sat down. I placed my own legal pad on the desk. I had been writing since 4 in the morning. "I have a plan," I said. Ward put his pen down. He leaned back, interlacing his fingers. "I am listening. I don't want a war, Ward. I don't want to destroy her." Ward raised an eyebrow. "After the letter she sent, after the fraud," I shook my head. "The fraud is her problem. The state will handle that. The contract is Mercy Health's problem. That is done." I tapped my notepad. "I want what is mine. I want the divorce finalized with the prenup enforced. Every cent. I want the protective order made permanent. And I want the civil suit to compensate me for my medical costs and my therapy and the time I missed work." And Ward asked, "And nothing?" I said. "I don't want punitive damages. I don't want to bankrupt her personally. I don't want to drag this out for 2 years in the press." Ward frowned. "Jan, you have her by the throat. We could take everything. I know, I said. And that is why I am letting go. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the empty street. If I destroy her, I am just playing her game. I am just another Bancroft fighting in the mud. I am not a Bancroft. I am Jenkinsey. I turned back to him. I want to walk away, Ward. Cleanly. With my name, my money, and my dignity. That is the only victory that matters. Ward looked at me for a long time. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner. He picked up his pen. He tapped it against the desk, a slow, rhythmic sound. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful. In 31 years of practice, that is the most dangerous thing a plaintiff can be. What reasonable, he said. Judges love reasonable. Juries love reasonable. And bullies like Phyllis, they don't know what to do with reasonable. It terrifies them. He pulled a fresh sheet of paper from his drawer. Okay, he said. Here is the strategy for Friday. He held up 3 fingers again. 1. The video. We show the assault. It is undeniable. 2. Keith's complicity. We show he recorded it on instruction. That breaks any claim that this was a mutual altercation. 3. Your recusal. We show the judge that you disclosed the conflict, step back, and let the system work. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. Phyllis's lawyer is going to argue retaliation, Ward said. He is going to paint you as a vengeful ex-wife. We are going to show the judge a woman who followed the rules. A woman who protected her employer even when her personal life was exploding. That is not retaliation, I said. That is integrity. Exactly, Ward said. And the fraud, we let the fraud speak for itself. We don't even have to bring it up. The fact that she is under state investigation will be in the judge's briefing packet. I nodded. It felt right. It felt clean. And what happens to Phyllis? I asked. Ward sighed. He looked at the diploma on his wall. Criminal assault charge most likely. The protective order will be permanent. The civil judgment will go against her and the state health department. He shrugged. That is a buzzsaw January. They will tear that company apart. Bancroft Medical will be in receivership by Christmas. It will be acquired. And the employees, I asked. The 42 people Keith was crying about. Companies survive ownership changes, Ward said. Employees usually keep their jobs. Phyllis won't. She will be barred from operating a medical supply company in Ohio. I felt a pang of sadness. Not for Phyllis, but for the waste of it all. I can't save them, I said quietly. No, Ward said. You can't. You could barely save yourself. I touched the pocket of my blazer. I could feel the crinkle of the note inside. You are enough. Ward stood up. He walked around the desk and extended his hand. We are ready, he said. I shook his hand. His grip was warm and solid. Ward walked me to the door. The Sunday sun was brighter now, hitting the pavement with a sharp, clear light. Jan, Ward said, as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I turned back. Gerald would have been proud of you. I smiled. It felt strange on my face, like a muscle I had not used in years. You knew him well, I asked. Ward smiled back a sad, knowing smile. Well enough to know he married the wrong woman, he said, and his son did too. But for different reasons. I walked to my car. Tomorrow was Monday, day 16, the hearing. Everything was about to end, or maybe for the first time, everything was about to begin. The courthouse hallway felt like a vacuum. The air was still thick and smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. I stood next to Ward, my navy blazer buttoned my hands, clasped in front of me. Dawn was on my other side, her presence a small warm anchor in the cold institutional sea. Then she arrived. Phyllis swept down the hall as if she were walking into a charity luncheon. She was wearing the emerald green suit, pearls at her ears, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. The scent of Estee Lauder Beautiful arrived a full 10 seconds before she did a chemical cloud of forced pleasantries. Craig Loomis was at her side, his expensive suit a shield. Behind them trailed Keith. He looked like a ghost. His tie was straight, this time a perfect Windsor knot. His mother had dressed him for his execution. He would not meet my eyes. He stared at the scuffed linoleum floor as if it held the answers to the universe. Phyllis saw me. Her eyes narrowed into tiny polished stones of hate. She did not speak. She did not have to. I need a minute, I whispered to Dawn. I walked to the women's restroom. The fluorescent lights were humming merciless. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. The bruise was a ghost, now a pale yellow shadow on my cheekbone that only I could see. But I could feel it. I would always feel it. I leaned closer to my reflection. I looked into my own eyes. You are enough, I whispered. The words were quiet, but they did not shake. I walked out. The courtroom doors were opening. The courtroom was smaller than I thought it would be. Judge Barlow sat at the bench, looking over a stack of files. The air conditioning hummed. A court reporter's fingers flew across a keyboard, a silent, steady clicking. We took our places. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands flat on the cool, smooth wood. Ward arranged his files. Across the room, Phyllis sat so straight, she seemed to levitate above her chair. She was a statue of indignation. Ward stood. He did not raise his voice. He laid out the facts like a surgeon arranging his instruments. The photos, the police report, the witness statements from two of Phyllis's own church friends, the protective order, and then he said, Your Honor, we would like to play Exhibit H. The courtroom television screen flickered to life. The video was shaky at first. It was Keith's perspective, standing beside his mother. I was visible in the frame, holding the gift box. I watched myself a stranger from 16 days ago. The courtroom heard the teeny sweet notes of Moon River playing from the phone's speakers. They heard Phyllis's voice, sharp and cold. What kind of worthless trash did you dare give me? They heard my voice, a thin whisper. Phyllis, I thought, and then they saw it, the slap. The wet, flat sound echoed in the quiet room. Someone in the gallery gasped. My glasses flew, but it was the next sound that made my blood run cold. It was faint, almost lost under Phyllis's triumphant sneer, but it was there, a short, sharp laugh. From behind the camera, from Keith. Ward paused the video. Your Honor, he said, his voice level, I would like to draw your attention to timestamp 1 minute and 52 seconds. After the strike, we hear Mr. Bancroft laugh. Judge Barlow slowly took off his glasses. He polished them with a handkerchief. He looked at Phyllis. Craig Loomis jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this was a momentary lapse, an emotional reaction from a woman under stress. Counsel Judge Barlow said, his voice dangerously quiet. I have seen the video. I have read the witness statements. I have also reviewed the complaint your client filed with Mrs. Kinsey's employer alleging retaliation. Let me ask Mrs. Bancroft a question directly. Phyllis stood. The pearls at her ears gleamed. Mrs. Bancroft, the judge said, you struck your daughter-in-law. On camera, at your own birthday party. Then you attempted to have her fired from her job when she sought legal protection. Is that an accurate summary of events she provoked me? Phyllis hissed. With a music box that played your wedding song, the judge finished. Silence. Judge Barlow put his glasses back on. He began to read from his notes. The protective order is made permanent. Mrs. Bancroft will maintain a distance of 500 feet from Mrs. Kinsey and have no contact, direct or indirect. The assault charge is referred to the prosecutor's office for criminal proceedings. The video is unambiguous. In the matter of the civil suit, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Janet Kinsey. Compensatory damages are awarded in the amount of $35,000. The court knows the petitioner's restraint in not seeking a punitive amount. He looked up directly at Phyllis. Mrs. Bancroft, I have presided from this bench for 22 years. I have rarely seen a respondent so thoroughly architect her own downfall. Every piece of evidence presented against you today was created by you or at your direction. I suggest you reflect on that. The gavel came down. It sounded like a bone breaking. I did not look at Phyllis. I looked at Keith. He was crying again, but this time he was not crying for himself. He was looking at his mother, and for the first time in his 40 years of life, I think he finally saw her. Court adjourned. Ward gathered his papers. Phyllis walked past my table. She stopped. For 1 second, we were 3 feet apart. Her mouth opened. Then it closed again. Nothing came out. She turned and walked away. Keith followed her, his head bowed. It is done, Jan Ward said. I looked at their retreating backs. No, I said. It is starting. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in December, I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment. It was a small one-bedroom in Clintonville, not far from dawn. The morning light streamed through the large window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. On the kitchen counter, my mother's recipe box sat open. The air smelled of cinnamon butter and brown sugar. I had put on music, not the teeny sound from a broken box, but a full orchestral version of Moon River. It filled the small apartment with a bittersweet warmth. The divorce had been finalized last week. The prenup held. Judge Barlow had denied Keith's challenge in a 6-minute hearing. I kept my savings. Keith kept the house and the mortgage that went with it. Bancroft Medical was in receivership. The state health department investigation was ongoing. Phyllis had been forced out as CEO. The company was being acquired by a larger competitor. 38 of the 42 employees kept their jobs. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Dawn. Banana bread ready. I am bringing wine. I smiled. 10 minutes, I typed back. Bring the good stuff. Another buzz. It was Ward. For your information, the prosecutor offered Phyllis a plea deal. Misdemeanor assault. She's fighting it. Wants a trial. Of course she does. I texted back. Some people cannot stop performing, he replied. Even when the audience has left, I walked to the window. Kids were riding bikes on the street below. A neighbor from across the hall waved. I had met more people in this building in 3 weeks than I had in 9 years in Upper Arlington. My mother's note was taped to my new refrigerator. Family isn't something you find. It is something you build. On the small kitchen table beside the recipe box sat the music box. I had found it on the floor behind the couch when I went to get my things from the house. It was abandoned, a piece of trash. I took it. The case was cracked. The mahogany was scarred. I wound the key. Moon River began to play. It was slightly off-key, now warped from the fall. Imperfect. I did not fix it. I liked it that way. The oven timer buzzed. The banana bread was done. I pulled it out the top, a perfect golden brown, a deep crack running down the middle. That is how you know it is real, my mother always said. The doorbell rang. It was Dawn, a bottle of wine in one hand and a Saturday smile on her face. I opened the door. The warm air rushed out to meet her. Come in, I said. It is still hot. You might spend years trying to keep the peace, believing that if you are just a little kinder, a little more thoughtful, they will finally see your worth. But the truth is, you cannot earn respect by quietly absorbing disrespect. True strength is not measured by how much you can endure, but by the moment you finally decide you will not endure it any longer. It is the moment you stop aiming your protective instincts at people who hurt you and finally start protecting yourself. Because a family that demands you shrink to fit inside it is not a family. It is a cage. You deserve to build a home where you can be whole. So I have to ask, what was your music box moment? What was that one final act, so small, yet so total, that made you realize enough was enough? Share your story below. You never know who needs to hear it.